And one of the examples that are still very, very present for me was in Ebola times in Sierra Leone. The response was very masculine. It was a peacekeeping mission, basically, that was set up from the UN in West Africa, following all these principles of the military structures. And they brought in hardware. They brought in soldiers. They brought in motorbikes. They brought in Ebola tents, like all this more hardware. And what I did was listening to my female national colleagues in the office. I went and I talked to the women on the street. I tried to get an understanding of why the virus was spreading. What were the problems women were having that had to give their babies away to an Ebola treatment center and never saw them again? Of course, they tried to keep the baby at home. Or when they had to be in quarantine and couldn't even leave the house to get firewood and they had to escape and they were followed by the police and got in trouble, things like that, was not in the awareness of the UN response on the ground. And I was fighting to get also anthropologists on the ground that understood the West African culture, that could speak the local languages, that went out and talked to the people.
Hi, I'm Rudy and this is Voices of Emergence. Today we are honored to welcome Silke von Brockhausen, a community weaver and regenerative leader who helps people and systems remember their wholeness. Silke is the founder of the Regenerative Collective and the seasoned facilitator of transformative spaces. With a background spanning international development, peacebuilding, and cultural transformation, she has worked at the intersection of policy, leadership, and community resilience for over 20 years. Her journey has taken her through the UN, United Nations, international NGOs, and grassroots initiatives, always with a focus on healing the fractures between people, systems, and the earth. Silke's work integrates trauma-informed approaches, feminine intelligence, and relational field attunement, creating spaces of deep trust, coherence, and collective possibility. She is passionate about cultivating regenerative leadership, supporting communities in navigating complexity, and fostering belonging in times of transform and fragmentation. Through her facilitation, Silke invites people to connect with inner resources, ancestral wisdom, and collective intelligence, helping groups shift from fear and separation into resilience, creativity, and wholeness. Welcome, Silke.
Thank you so much, Rudy. What a beautiful introduction.
So, our first question to all our guests is always like, when you hear the word emergence, what awakens in you? What does that mean for you?
It's an interesting word because I have been an emergency responder for the last 10 years for the United Nations, and the words are obviously so close to each other. And I reflected on this, and for me, emergency is the moment when the system stops, when there's a shock, when it's stalling, when it's contracting, when a flood happens, a war breaks out. And then compared to that, emergence is the moment where things come alive again, where there is a possibility of things to be built, created, and flow. And I realized that I've moved now from being this emergency responder to more of an emergence cultivator who is trying to build this environment or framework or setting where emergence can happen. And for that, I think it all starts with a nourished soil, which are usually, for example, in the UN, the staff members, they need to feel seen and heard and supported. And then emergence is the process that happens when you hold these brave spaces for colleagues, and that's when innovation and ideas and can grow. And I liked what one of our collective members said about what regeneration is, and I think that matches very well to emergence, is that life always finds a way. And you see that in conflict zones, women still have babies. Nature grows back where it was destroyed by war. See it on my balcony, this little flower coming out of nowhere in the concrete, blossoming out of nowhere. And yeah, so for me, this is this emergence that can happen when the world stands still or is in conflict and things grow.
It's a beautiful quality of life, how things grow from destruction, then it all grows again. You have such an incredible background in peace building, in regeneration, in leadership. I'd love to know, what were some of the turning points in your life that shaped who you are today?
Mm. Good question. And I think it all started already very young when I remember that I was watching the Secretary General when I was 12 in the news, and I knew inside that this is the place I want to be. And through my adult life, people would tell me this is impossible. And I still continued having this vision of me working in the UN. And at the same time, I was also always about justice and against injustice. I had this very strong feeling of protecting everybody around me that was treated unjust, or unfair. That has been a bit of the guiding force why I always knew I wanted to work in the field of peace and building, development. And when I came to the UN, it was a dream come true. And after a couple of years, I realized there was so much that didn't work. I felt I couldn't be blossoming and creative as I wanted to be because there's a very, very strong hierarchy, bureaucracy, outside forces that want to influence the UN. Then inside also often overwhelmed leaders. There's always this sense of emergency in all areas of the UN, the sense of scarcity because the money is always lacking because the problems of the world are so big. People are stressed out because they have to leave their families to go on missions. They work under incredible circumstances, nonstop for months to support people in emergencies. And that whole environment was constricting, and it doesn't allow for this emergence we were talking about. And I kept trying to find the reasons, and I think why it was like this. And this journey led me to also regenerative leadership. When I started to learn about this concept, and it was a bit the first humanitarian leadership workshop in UNICEF in New York that I took, where the facilitator was bringing some of those principles across. And then I read books, and I met Rudy actually in Ibiza. He was always like the champion for regeneration on the island. And because of him, I got a whole list of books, and I got involved in the whole regeneration community. And I also, thanks to you, Rudy, I learned about the Regenerators Academy, about bio-leadership with Andres Robert, about, I think I also, then went to Theory U, to Otto Scharmer's MIT lab, and I did art of hosting. And all these pieces together, they made me convinced that these are tools that can help address the situation I, as a UN staff member, am in these situations. They really equip you with the knowledge and wisdom how you can deal with situation, and still be the best version of yourself, still find your full potential in a system that is constricting just by design. So this is my mission now, to bring this back to the UN and inspire colleagues with this.
Thank you for this beautiful introduction on your part, and I'm happy that I'm a little part of that. So, but I wanted to go a bit, if you don't mind, to go a bit deeper on that feeling of unfairness, and why we come to do what we do because as we learn and as we transform, we often realize also that, we are looking to the outside world because there is a lacking or something lacking from within, or something that we haven't been given, when we were a child or as in our childhood and all that. And a lot of us now, we actually discover that that is the path forward, to actually go first to that inner transformation before going out to the world again, because we know that actually if we don't do that inner transformation or that inner healing, we keep on repeating the same mistakes, and I know that you have seen a lot of, probably unfairness in the world, and imbalanced world, and also a very, I think, very masculine world and masculine systems, or paternalistic system, as a woman in the UN and in all these places were mostly dominated by men. So I want to dig a bit deeper of like, how do you experience that yourself, or how do you see that also? Is that really a part for the future of humanity, or an important part, or is it something that is just like, a passing fad or something, or trend?
That's a beautiful point you touched on, because as for me, the whole foundation of really, if you want to transform a system like the UN, like your own communities, it's so cliche, but change starts with yourself. And I myself observed that for me, understanding all these internal limiting beliefs that I had, conditioning that I got from my family, from my environment in Germany, from the culture, from religion, from later also colleagues and bosses, all of these were opportunities for me to self-reflect and to understand why I had these beliefs in my head, why I might have been triggered by certain events in my career and in my private life, and where it came from. And this kind of inner work, I think it helps us to reconnect with our authentic self. And that is key if we want to inspire others. I think if they understand that you're coming to a place, to a meeting, to create a policy on something, and it comes from your authentic self, and it's not driven by agendas or by a skewed view of the world, or by a lack of something, or by fears or insecurities that you might have. This radiates, and it really can transform a meeting if you go there open, vulnerable, and you have understood yourself, your own biases. Then people notice. And on the other side, I think if you haven't done this personal reflection or inner work, I think you create this friction in meetings, in negotiations, in joint collaborations at a global scale in the UN, because people can understand that you're doing it for your own interest, for your own agenda, based on your own insecurities, and it also in general leads to this destructive behavior if you're doing your work because you're still conditioned by a mindset that is maybe less collaborative.
Well, Silke, that's really yeah, that's quite profound. How would you define regeneration, and how much does that have to do with inner work? And I think especially with the UN, I think about people who work at the UN, and a lot of Western people come in with a certain type of programming, even a certain type of colonial mindset, institutional mindset. Um, how do people become aware of their own programming in order to be more authentic and more effective on the field?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question, Alex. And I mean, for one thing, I have to say what is beautiful about working at the UN is that most of my colleagues, if not all, they come with a beautiful intention and purpose to the space. And a lot of my colleagues come also from cultures that are already, I would say, much more connected to themselves, to their communities, to nature, and are in general already very open um, to being open-minded and to being coming to work with an open heart for a good reason. And that does allow already for a lot of collaboration to happen, even though we are coming from all sorts of countries and religious backgrounds, which sometimes also leads to misunderstandings and cultural issues. But I feel like there's already this field of we're here for a positive change, transformation in the world, which opens it up. And at the same time, what I feel is we don't have the time to go deeper and to listen and to breathe and to regulate our nervous system, which I feel is one of the core principles of regeneration, to calm down, to take a step back, to not be reactive, but to also first understand why you're reacting now, then breathe, then listen to the other person. And for me, regeneration is means that you actually start listening more. That um, you try to understand better other worldviews, and I think that's the only way how we can create peace across humankind, if we understand that we are all the same and that we are one humanity that has the same needs. I have also seen leadership programs in the UN that have instilled also this kind of regenerative, agile leadership style in people I worked with closely. And it was incredible to see how they suddenly managed to create an environment where everybody felt safe to be innovative, take risks, and where emergence could happen, which for me, it's also the one of the basics of regeneration. And unfortunately, these programs were always canceled because of lack of money. And that's very frustrating when you see that this is working and people are open to it. It's a shame.
Yes, Silke, I also truly admire your work and your part, within the UN, and I want to hear a bit more about how it was as a woman, like you went to all these, zones that are, quite critical, like post-cyclone recovery in Vanuatu. You were there in the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone. You were in the Yemen's war, zones to peace consultations also with the Taliban in Afghanistan. So they're not like very comfortable zones, So how do you as a woman, experience that? And also what were your learnings there?
I had it. I mean, I had this drive inside of me always to be in the center of the biggest crisis. I always felt this would be the place I could impact the most and transform the most, instead of sitting in New York behind a desk and writing papers and going to meetings. So I pushed for it from the first day of my career to be sent as an emergency responder, and gratefully or thankfully to some inspiring male bosses, I was sent there. And back then, I mean, I started with these missions around 2012. I was really one of the very few women on the ground in these places. And even now, in my last mission in Afghanistan, there were not many women in leadership positions. And I always loved that challenge, and I always tried to show men how it's being done and tried to be faster and better and harder working, and it really brought me to this almost burnout, or where I was just always giving too much energy and not being myself. And I think that creates this disalignment in you, that like this is not your authentic self. You're not going on the right path right now, and you maybe have like lack of sleep, and you're eating unhealthy, and you're not feeling yourself and authentic. And from that realization brought me to finding my way of actually being the woman in these places, and seeing it also as my role, that I was sent there to be an example for the women on the ground, but also to embody female qualities. And one of the examples that are still very, very present for me was in Ebola times in Sierra Leone. The response was very masculine. It was a peacekeeping mission, basically, that was set up from the UN in West Africa, following all these principles of the military structures. And they brought in hardware, they brought in soldiers, they brought in motorbikes, they brought in Ebola tents, like all this more hardware. And what I did was, listening to my female national colleagues in the office, I went out and I talked to the women on the street. I tried to get an understanding of why the virus was spreading. What were the problems women were having that had to give their babies away to an Ebola treatment center? Never saw them again. Of course, they tried to keep the baby at home. Or when they had to be in quarantine and couldn't even leave the house to get firewood, and they had to escape, and they were followed by the police and got in trouble, things like that. And was not in the awareness of the UN response on the ground. And I was fighting to get also anthropologists on the ground that understood the West African culture, that could speak the local languages, that went out and talked to the people. And I hope that brought some added value into the response in Sierra Leone, that we started to better get a picture. And I think that's the quality as a woman that you can bring in also in negotiations with the Houthis in Yemen or with the Taliban. I think just being present as a woman changes the energy, the topics, the situation. And in meetings with my UN colleagues, it's always a lot about being fast, conveying data, facts, which is important. But for me, when I understood my role better, I started to also share my feelings and my shock and my grief, and that reconnected everybody in the rooms back to their purpose, to their intention, and to their emotions. And I felt sometimes that really created a bigger coalition or a bigger impact on the ground if you follow your emotions and you speak up and you get angry. All of this, I think, was my my role in these responses. And I think it creates a lot of problems if you only have what you would call like maybe a more materialistic, masculine, hierarchical mindset in your organizational culture, versus bringing in these what some consider more feminine attributes, like collaboration, listening, feeling, and nurturing. And the best teams I've seen is where both of this comes together and we work hand in hand. And that has been beautiful to see. And it's also something I've become a champion for, to not check the box when it comes to gender equality, but to really live it in the teams that I work with. Long response to a short question.
No, yeah, but that is very,
About-
yeah, I see you're passionate about it, and it's very resonant with me. There's a motivational speaker called Simon Sinek,
Yeah.
and He has a TED Talk, which has been viewed, I don't know, 50 million times or more, where he talks about, the masculine energy is very much about what to do and how to do it.
Mm.
And you're talking about what he was talking about, which is the why. Why should you be doing something? Not just what to do and how, but why. And you can only get to this by listening, by intuition. And I think what I heard from what you said is that there's a collective intelligence that arises. And through this collective intelligence, you can get to the root cause. For example, the root cause of Ebola, you know, not just how to deal with it, but why it happened in the first place. And with this, you can actually fix things at a deeper level. So I think it's very resonant and very important. How does this relate to the regenerative collective, which you started? What was the motivation to start it, and how is it unfolding now?
Oh, thanks for this reflection. And the collective has been a dream of mine for a number of years, because I realized there are a lot of people inside the UN that are very open to connecting more with each other, share experiences, and transform the UN from the inside into an organization that is capable of addressing the meta crisis of our times, and to adapt better to it through system thinking, design thinking, regenerative thinking, allowing innovation to happen, but also providing a better working environment and encouraging working environments for the staff. And I left the UN full time 2 years ago, and since then I have been in touch with all these amazing change makers like Rudy and yourself, and thinkers and academy holders and or teachers and practitioners of regeneration. And then I realized what is needed is to bring these ideas into this UN-wide network. So I used my LinkedIn account because most of my LinkedIn contacts are from my 20 years as working in the UN. And also from all these experiences I had with MIT Lab and Art of Roasting. And I announced that I'm creating this, and we had some calls, and I was just overwhelmed by the response. And I realized there is this huge awareness that things have to change, and that the UN is still important. It's still a huge platform of 30 plus agencies with 130,000 staff worldwide and 193 member state countries present, that it is such a beautiful platform to start this exploration of what would it mean if an organization like the UN would transform into an organization that supports not just the status quo, but really looks at how can we thrive as a humanity? How can we get back into planetary boundaries? How can we transform ourselves as individuals to create this change at a global level? So now we have this group, and we have these 350 people that are actively contributing. And my dream is that this will be a bridge for anybody in the UN interested in regeneration, that they can then contact us, get in touch, learn with us, explore with us what it means. And hopefully in the future, the word regeneration will be as present as sustainability or other frameworks that the UN is following.
Yeah, thank you for that initiative also, Silke, and a wonderful project also. So I'm also part of some of the discussions in there, and what I feel also, and what I would like to hear from you is like the future vision of UN, because I think UN has even a more important role to play than it has had in the past. But many people also, especially in Global South and all that, don't seem to be convinced by that. And if we see the what certain Western countries are still doing or still operating in African countries regarding mining and all that, like even if we say like, okay, we are in a green economy or we're going to build a green economy and we're still going to, use all the resources from Africa without the local people benefiting from it. So I think regeneration is really going to be key, but also understanding that, the algorithms and the media and what these messages are influencing people in the global side and south and from other countries. It's not just that I think about work on the field, but it's even more also a work about, influence and information and, like knowing that AI is going to come up and it's going to produce probably 95% of the news, or the fake news. I mean, how do you see that working? Is it by reinforcing local communities? It's probably a joint effort of many different things, but I wanted to tap a bit in your vision because I know that you're also working on like a project for the new Secretary General. So can you lift the slip of the, of
Oh,
what we know? Yeah.
happy to reveal my 2027 agenda. That's the year when we will have a new UN Secretary General replacing the current Portuguese Antonio Guterres. And the campaign is basically starting now. And just from the rotation that is happening, it should be finally a woman. And from Latin America is what has been discussed. And this woman, I do hope, will be a champion for regeneration. And my dream is to create together with this collective, basically a blueprint or an agenda for the Secretary General of how it could become, the UN could become a champion for regeneration by regenerating itself. And the start of the whole collective, and also for this agenda, the foundation will probably be the manifesto that we have as a collective that we co-created. And it has 3 layers, basically. One is about regenerating yourself, like regulating the nervous system, and better listening skills, and better collaboration skills, and understanding where you're not fulfilling your potential, understanding your own motivation, your why, your purpose, your meaning as an individual working inside the UN. But then the second layer would be, how can leaders in the UN create this environment where this kind of inner work is possible, and this expansion of potential is feasible. And for me, regenerative leadership concepts give a great idea on this. And it has to do a lot with self-organization of teams, giving agency to your people, decentralization, having feedback loops constantly on what is working, what is not working inside the organization, how are staff feeling about things, giving them more opportunities to decide on their own fate and their own vacations, and all these kind of things that very progressive organizations are already doing. So it's possible. We've seen a lot of examples, and I want to bring these examples into the UN and help people to actually transform the way we are managing at the moment. But then the third layer would be, how does that then turn into good services and products if you look at the business sector? But in the UN, it would be, how would that turn into good policies and programs for the world and where we're working in? And how we are working, is it really about also providing agency to people, listening to people that we work with, and also really, really valuing their needs and their understanding of the world, bringing in their wisdom, not as a check the box exercise when we talk about supporting Indigenous leaders, or localization or consultation with our stakeholders. It should be really the DNA of the organization that it works for the people it works with. And those are some of the areas that I feel are going to be important for the new Secretary General to address. I hope through the collective we can provide this kind of toolbox or agenda or ideas. And for this, I'm also planning to start a podcast now to invite all these people who are already knowledgeable or who have already done this transformation in their organizations and ask them, how did you do it? Do you have tips for us? How can we do that at a global scale with the UN? And I'm very excited about taking this further.
I love this three-part structure for regeneration. I think it's very important. It seems to me the real work now for the planet and for humanity is to work across cultures. I mean, somehow globalization came, but everyone is still quite different and separate. You know, I'm multicultural myself. My mother's from Finland. My father's Brazilian. I was born in Paris. My father was a diplomat, so I lived in many different countries. So I always had to accept new cultures, adapt to them, learn about them. And so that was part of my life. But when I observe the world, you know, in Europe and the US, there's not so much acceptance, and other cultures are, you know, put apart. There's a huge immigration problem. So, you know, it feels to me this is a really important work now for humanity as a whole. Do you feel there are rituals or metaphors or storytelling or archetypes that help us deal with multiculturality and, you know, different peoples and acceptance? And how do we become aware of shadows, you know, within institutions, within collectives? Like, how do we become aware of our shadows and deal with them collectively?
This is such a multi-layered question, Alex. And also, I wish I had the answer. But maybe a bit related to it is one part of Rudy's question that I haven't touched, but the AI question also. I think we are getting all these tools now that allow us to work cross-culturally and globally, that connect us as a collective conscious, and that we can all tap into all the wisdom of the world. But we still have a tribal mindset. We are all thinking just to our own door, or maybe if we are connected to our community, maybe within our village or block in the city or whatever, but that's where our radius stops. And I think that creates these problems, that we think that this is our safe zone and the rest could be potentially dangerous, or we don't care about it. But obviously it doesn't work, because when a war breaks out in the world, we're all affected. We've seen it with the increase of living expenses around the world, with shortages of resources, but also with refugee streams, that this is a global place. And I believe we need to look at both sides. I do think we need to come back and connect with our place and our community. And for me, the vision for the UN would be to look at bioregions, at watersheds, and organize the nation states around that, and our programming looking more at how a bioregion can become self-sufficient, so you avoid too much global trade. Also, people produce their own food and live in their area, which would be more sustainable for the planet. But you do still need this this global mindset that you mentioned, Alex, and this feeling that we are all one. And I think, you know, it's something I've experienced. I traveled, I think, in my life now to 90 countries, and I lived in 20. And I think you too, Alex, you've been everywhere in the world, and Rudy is very international too. But just this exposure to each other, to understand that, yeah, there are people that annoy me in every country in the world, and there are people that I can connect with so easily. And I wish everybody to have this opportunity to connect with people who are different, And we tend, again, in our tribal mindset, always look for people who are similar. And I think just one exercise would be to ensure that you go out and talk maybe to an elderly people or to young people. Make friends with somebody who doesn't have your educational background, and expose yourself more to the diversity of this planet. And you will see there's so much wisdom in children. There's so much wisdom in elderly, but we prevent us because it's more convenient. And I am worried that the same is happening with regeneration as a topic. It feels like it's still very elite and it's academic and it's similar people talking about it, but we don't have so many voices of others in it. And I think that's something we want to change in the collective. And Rudy has also done a step in this direction to invite more people that are maybe a bit different than the usual suspects that are talking about it. I think that's just one. And yeah, sorry, Alex, maybe you had more layers to your question, but maybe guide me.
Look, it's a multi-layered question, and I think we're all trying to find the answer, and it's a very complicated question, but I was very inspired by what you just said. So thank you.
Yeah, I can pick up from there. Like community starts in your own street, right? So, like talk to your own neighbors, like do something positive in your own village or in your own neighborhood. And I think from my experience, I know a lot of people, that are not just in academic, they just decide to, like actually step out of the system and just go work with the land, create local communities, local products. And I see a lot of, hope in there. So, and I think also in the world that we see now, it's easy to look at the collapse that we're all seeing in front of us, but then there's also a way of looking at life, from the emergence perspective. That's also why we created this podcast and voice the stories of the people that are working in this emergent fields that believe in humanity. And so I also know that you are particularly very fond of, working in joy and with beauty or play. And I want to know how that shows up in your life and in your work.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks for reminding me. But yes, I do. I mean, I've always been very positive, very optimistic, and enjoying life. And this opportunity to work for the UN was a dream come true. So I've been grateful every single day that I had this opportunity, because it did expose me to all these cultures and points of views. And I think I learned so much that I cannot even fathom yet at this moment. Um, but I also was um, so beautifully surprised to come to all these emergency countries, contexts, and see people who have lost everything in their life. And they just, in Vanuatu, this is an example, Cyclone Pen, I think 2016, the whole village was gone. All the bamboo houses were like spread throughout the jungle, and people lost all their documents and everything. They saw us coming as UN staff that tried to assess the damage in the middle of nowhere. We had to take like an Australian Navy boat for 2 days and then take a helicopter to be landed, dropped in the jungle. They were the most welcoming people. They organized this huge banquet dinner with the remaining food that they had saved from the cyclone. And we're still making music, and we're still saying, it's all okay, we can manage, we have this every year and we know how to deal with it. And you're just expecting like this misery and suffering. And then you come back to Germany and people complain that, I don't know, the neighbor has put the fence too far to the left or right. And it's just helped me to focus, because it's such a great resilient survival strategy to see the good things. And I do believe that there's also a psychological impact if you choose to see the good things, you will focus more on the good, and then automatically also um, you will open up for the opportunities of goodness, lightness, joy coming into your life. If you would watch only the horror news or engage only in this destructive discussions or gossiping and all of this, you will get more of this in your life, because then you attract the people who also like that, and then you will be surrounded by it. So I was inspired by Otto Scharmer theory here, imagining the emergent future is one of his big visions, that if we all would imagine a better future, there is a possibility that it will happen, because we all start to focus our energy on it. And right now, a lot of space in the world is given to people who are imagining a destructive future. And I think the more we can see the beauty in the world and the joy and the potential of an even better future, the more it will also be possible. So that's just my perspective. And I think there's also a problematic aspect to it, that it's easy to then not see the grief and suffering and saying, like, I don't want to focus on it. But I think it was mentioned earlier in the podcast as well, that even these shadows that we have and see, if we look closer into them with presence and with compassion, it will also guide us to a way out, to how can we then use this grief and anger to transform it again into something positive by holding it, by acknowledging it. And I think that's at the core also of the decolonial discussion that I think is very important to have in the UN. And there are already strands of this discussion happening of where did the UN maybe try to impose westernized politics, or was not acknowledging diversity or supporting it and listening. And where did it hurt? Like, if you acknowledge this and you go through it, you will find ways to avoid that in the future, to recognize the suffering that has happened, make sure it doesn't happen, and collectively come to a reconciliation. See, this is when I think how you can align the big problems in the world with still approaching it with joy and lightness, because that's going to also inspire people to do the difficult work, because they see a reward for it, and maybe stay also long term on this marathon that we are on, and not just go for the short term benefits of winning a war or gaining economic advantages or resources. Long topic to discuss.
Well, Silke, it's very inspiring. You know, my upbringing was that success is defined by productivity, optimization, and I live in a culture in the US where it's always about working, being busy, optimizing yourself, having a very busy schedule all the time. So, you know, if you're not at work, then you're at the gym or you're out socializing and you're doing something all the time. And this thing of progress and doing, and, you know, and you're a good member of society when you're working or you're consuming. If you're not working or consuming, then, you know, what's going on? And I, you know, I learned this when I was on my vision quest, which is 4 days in the forest, not doing anything, no electronics, no books, nothing. It's just you and the forest. Some other people do a Vipassana retreat, you know, 10 days of silence. And I felt guilty. I felt guilty being in the forest, not doing anything. I'm like, wow, this is really selfish. Like, I should be out working, or I should be on vacation consuming, you know, but here I am in the forest, just me. And I felt this productivity guilt. And it was really like something to look at. Like, wow, the programming is deep that I feel guilty just for being in a natural state. Before civilization, people were out in nature all the time. And here I felt guilty about it. And so what you just said is so interesting because like this process from emergency to emergence has a lot to do with peace, with joy, with listening, with taking a pause. Like the resilience is not in the productivity, but it's in the pause, it's in the joy, it's in finding the music even after a hurricane, you know? And that is true resilience. And so that's very inspiring with what you just said. I don't really have a question, but those are my observations.
I love this framing. Absolutely. And I feel like machines or structures or organizations, they need that. They need your constant energy that you're giving in. And I felt myself that I'm giving more energy to this system than to the things that matter to me more, of connecting with others and listening and making a difference. And I can only wish so many people in the world to have that opportunity to do a vision quest or to take a pause. And I'm also convinced that you can do these tiny little things of giving people this experience of a pause and a stop from doing by just starting meetings with silence or with breathing together. I think these moments, and we've done that also in UNICEF during COVID, we had meditation exercises before our team meetings. They offered meditation meeting during the week for all of the, 20,000 UNICEF staff. And I always felt after that we were reconnected to our purpose. And I think that's what people need, this reconnecting. Why am I doing all of this? And how can I do it in a way that it's still adding value and not just taking energy from me? Where can I also take energy back? And yeah, I I think there are some beautiful methods to help people to do this. And I want to bring more of this to the world.
That brings us to the end of our interview here. So we always have a last question. In regeneration, a seed is very important. A seed in nature carries all the wisdom of so many years, so many decades, so many centuries or whatever, so and much longer. So, and that intelligence always gets carried to future generations. So what is the seed that you would like to plant for future generations?
What is my seed? We talked now about so many things that are important, but maybe the Beatles said it best, like imagine. I think helping people to imagine that it can, how beautiful it is, how beautiful the world is. I think that can really rally people around engaging and feeling they still have agency and they still have a common cause to work on.
Wow, that's beautiful, Silke. Imagination, I think, is one of the most underrated traits, of humans and what we can do with that. So I thank you for your time and all your wisdom and sharing your story with us. And I wish you lots of luck with your future projects. Alex, a last word?
Oh, thank you, Silke. I was very inspired, and thank you for spending this time with us and for sharing your experience and your wisdom.
Thank you both for this beautiful space to listen to you, also to learn from you during this conversation. And to feel very heard and seen by both of you. Thank you for that.
Sing no more naked days are you,